Hello everybody, and happy late summer to you. Les here at the end of August. Can't believe the summer's already gone and fall's right around the corner. Wanted to follow up with a new video in relation to the video I shot last month, where I was discussing how I've obtained my new fancy designation, the Retirement Income Certified Professional, or the RICP as it's known. We'll be promoting that a little bit more in the next few months. But such great knowledge, whether you're retired already or if you're starting to prepare for retirement. And so today I wanted to start to get into the meat of what I kind of learned in that designation process. And in the curriculum, we identify 19 different risks in retirement. That's a lot. That's a big number. Certainly, we're not going to go through all of those today. But I wanted to pick out, I'm going to start with 4 of the risks today. We'll talk a little bit about those 4. And then I will shoot further videos until we get through all 19. And you know, the reason there's 19 is, as I mentioned in the last video, if you remember, the accumulation phase of saving and 401ks and IRAs, and our money's growing and we're working and we're contributing, all those great things to build our nest egg. That you can make a lot of mistakes along the way. If you remember my analogy of climbing the mountain, and if you trip and fall, you fall into the mountain, you dust yourself off, and then you keep going, right? You can overcome a lot of mistakes during that phase, the accumulation phase of life. But when you get to the peak of the mountain, and we're coming down the mountain in what we call the decumulation phase, those mistakes get magnified quite a bit in retirement. And so they're much harder to overcome if we make some of those mistakes. And so that's why I wanted to talk about some of these risks so that we better understand them. Just know that here at YellowWood, when we're helping with retirement income planning, we're taking into account all 19 risks. But I'm hoping this video, when I kind of go through these 4, may spur some questions. And obviously always reach out to us here at YellowWood to discuss anything that might be on your mind. So first of all is longevity risk. And this is the big one, right? The longer we live, the more money we're going to need to pay our bills over time. So then we run the risk of potentially running out of money, okay? And that's the one thing that's on a lot of retirees' minds when they first retire is that particular scenario. The other thing with longevity is that your health care costs tend to increase over a 20 or 30 year retirement, right? Especially those last few years of life are the most expensive. And when I say expensive, I mean really big numbers. So we have that factor to consider. Inflation over time becomes more and more of an issue as it compounds. And certainly the last few years since COVID, we've seen some incredible numbers, inflation numbers. I don't need to go into that. We're all aware of that. We're currently at about 3% inflation. Historically, in our software, we ran about a 2.5% inflation rate projection when doing our retirement planning. But even the difference between 2.5% and 3% is pretty significant. So we have to keep an eye on inflation over a longer retirement period. And then lastly, the risk of a long-term care event also happens the longer that we live. Your likelihood of having dementia or something like that and requiring an assisted living facility, maybe a long-term care facility, which we know those are also very expensive, the incidence of that actually increases. So as you can see, the longer we live, there's a whole lot of costs that begin to snowball. So that's a longevity risk. I'll let that settle in right there. The next big risk I want to cover today is inflation risk. Already touched on that a little bit, but the cost of living is going up. We deplete our savings that much faster, especially if our investment portfolios not helping us keep up with inflation. Now here at YellowWood, we're very aware of that. You know, back in the old days of retirement, you would retire at 65, put all your money in a CD and let it sit there very safely. The problem with a long retirement is our cost of living is doing that, and our investments need to continue to mirror that, so to speak, so that we don't run out of money. But however, if we increase our exposure to equities, we also increase our exposure to volatility of the stock market, which makes many of us kind of nervous. And so that has to be managed. So that's another big risk in retirement. I'm going to move on to risk number 3 here. One of these is kind of scary, and then the fourth one is the exact opposite. Number 3 is excess withdrawal risk. In our business, you may have heard of the 4% rule in retirement. There's been a gazillion articles written about this. Comes from research in the financial planning community back in the mid-90s. It's actually still very popular in the press. And the idea is that if I have a $1 million portfolio retirement, let's say, that I can take out about 4% a year. That's $40,000 a year to spend in addition to Social Security and pensions and things. And know that that $1 million more than likely is going to definitely stay intact over 30 years, if not continue to grow. Okay, so the 4% rule is really for the worst case scenario. There's scenarios in the research that suggest you can take 6-7%, but you may end up running out of money. Just depends on what happens over that 30-year retirement, 20-year retirement that you might live through. Around YellowWood, we like 4%, 5% maybe. Once we get to about 5%, that starts to make us a little bit nervous. And so it's very important that when we're starting to take withdrawals, replace that paycheck, that we're very honest with ourselves about what our spending might be in retirement. That's very, very key. And so many of you have probably already heard us kind of make sure we tighten those numbers up so that we don't have any surprises when it comes to spending. Because once we start overspending, that can create some anxiety, and retirement's not as fun. The next risk, the fourth one we'll talk about today, is underspending risk. Now, this might sound crazy, but the reality is, and our research shows this, many retirees end up leaving a lot of money behind, either to family, to charity, church, whatever it might be, and because they're nervous and they're scared to spend their money and enjoy their money during retirement. Actually, we spend a decent amount of time at YellowWood helping our clients spend their money. That might sound counterintuitive, but it's a very real thing. We just want to make sure that you're comfortable spending your money in retirement, whether it's buying a new car, going on an extra trip, whatever it might be. It might be a second property, a vacation property that you might consider buying. We want to make sure that we kind of give you the okay, so to speak, to do some of those things, whereas you might be nervous. What we've learned is over time that as you're retired and your investments are going up and down in value with the 24/7 news cycle, you may get nervous to the point that you're afraid to spend any of it, because you're afraid, well, what if this happens? What if that happens, right? And so we maybe don't take an extra vacation that we could have. So we like to have those kinds of conversations. And I tell clients all the time, look, if you don't spend it, I promise you your children will. And if they don't spend it, I know for sure the government would love to. So hopefully that's some motivation to maybe spend a little bit more. Certainly come to us if you're nervous about spending or doing something really fun. We can help you talk through that, whether it's a good idea or not. The brain chemistry really changes in retirement and with retirement spending. A lot of times, once that paycheck stops coming in, the brain says, okay, we can't spend anymore. And it gets very kind of paranoid about any extra spending. So we can help with that too. Those are the four risks in retirement that we'll cover today. And for the next video, we'll pick up another 4 that we'll talk about. Thank you so much for listening. I know this one went a little long, but we think it's really good material, really good knowledge for you. And we're looking forward to seeing you in the fall on the next video. Thanks a lot. Bye.